12 Secular Steps, An Addiction Recovery Guide by Bill W. Chapter 5, The First 90 Days Sober, and Steps 1, 2, 3. This chapter begins with an epigraph. A quote from Carson McCullers, "The heart is a lonely hunter." The most fatal thing a man can do is try to stand alone. Chapter summary. In early recovery, the addictive voice will persistently hound you with urges like, "Just one more time, no one will know," or "It's just a matter of time until you give in, so why fight it?" Or even, "So what, you screwed up again, just keep it under control from now on." It may seem that this voice is your own inner voice, but don't be fooled. This voice belongs to a psychological parasite called the addictive drive. It has a brain, your brain, so it knows everything you know. It's a formidable enemy, one that might one day take your life. Please don't ignore it, underestimate it, or hope it will go away on its own. In addition to fighting off this demon, most addicts new to recovery additionally struggle with depression, resentment, loneliness, desperation, financial crisis, and relentless self-loathing. I remember times when it seemed like every thought and emotion within me was pushing me toward a little relief through relapse. If you go into this fight alone and unprepared, I doubt you will last very long. With that said, welcome to the most important chapter in this book. Our goal here is to introduce the essential tools and strategies that serve one purpose: achieve the first 90 days of sobriety. This can be a Herculean task, so we'll get right to the work of building a recovery toolbox and outlining a 90-day plan. The tools and strategies presented here are not original. They are common suggestions that newcomers will hear over and over in AA and NA. They worked for me in my early recovery, and in turn, I now endorse them to you. Before we start, attend to physical needs and safety. If we are deprived of adequate food, shelter, safety, or meaningful human contact, it will be hard to build a solid foundation that will sustain our future sobriety. Miraculously, some who are deprived of housing, money, and ties to friends and family still manage to build enough support and motivation to realize a long-lasting recovery. It has been amazing to witness recoveries against such odds, but there are so many failures against these odds as well. It can be very difficult to find adequate help for a newcomer who is faced with substantial financial and personal needs they cannot currently meet on their own. Most of us begin recovery before we have hit so low a bottom that we have lost everything. But the climb can still be very steep. Generally, addicts begin their recovery in crisis mode and at the same time are physically, emotionally, and psychologically worn down by hardships caused by years, if not decades, of addiction. On the whole, the topic of financial, housing, and medical support is beyond what I can cover in this book. But I will say that when newcomers keep coming back to meetings and openly talk to members about their difficulties, I have often seen solutions come about for them in the rooms of AA and NA. Someone will help them find temporary work or to obtain aid through an assistance program. Many times I have seen members help those new to their groups get placement in a rehabilitation facility or a bed in a halfway house. Help with transportation, especially a ride to a meeting, is often easy to arrange. No one can make promises that AA or NA will help solve financial and medical problems, but to avail themselves of potential assistance in the rooms, it's important that newcomers show up and get involved. Don't tread water around the rescue boat. Get in the boat. medically supervised drug detoxification, and inpatient-outpatient rehab. Ideally, everyone beginning their recovery should have a medical and psychological assessment and pursue appropriate treatment and stabilization. An assessment may indicate that medical management of withdrawals is appropriate, especially for those addicted to alcohol, heroin, narcotic painkillers, and the benzodiazepine class drugs used for anxiety and insomnia. In such cases, the journey may start in an inpatient drug and alcohol detoxification unit. This may be followed by admittance into an inpatient or outpatient rehabilitation program. I only mention these aspects of recovery, but additional information is available through hotlines and many online resources that are easy to find and access. Successfully recovered people at AA and NA meetings may be very knowledgeable on local resources. Tools and strategies for early recovery. If you're going up against this 500-pound gorilla known as your addictive drive, it might benefit you to have a plan. Arm yourself with tried and true tools, grab the heavy ones, and bring some friends into the fight with you. AA and NA will help you put it all together. Oh yes, and one more thing. Don't forget the little catchphrases you'll hear 1,000 times in AA and NA meetings. These phrases such as, don't drink or use today no matter what. Play the tape through. Do this a day at a time, a minute at a time when necessary. Tend to echo in your head at just the right moment to help you resist relapse. They work by allowing you to stop, think for a moment, and engage the most powerful tool available. Choice. When you go into the fight, have the right frame of mind when things get tough. A figure follows, titled, The Early Recovery Toolbox. Don't drink or use today no matter what. Repeat this phrase so many times that it becomes a reflex. Include it in your 90-day plan as a daily commitment to be renewed each morning. Create a personal recovery network. Get a sponsor. Get phone numbers from recovered addicts at meetings. Pick people with sobriety that you respect. I would suggest folks with at least a year clean. Call them at least weekly. Get to know them well enough that you won't hesitate to call during moments when you're struggling to stay sober. 12-step programs have a long tradition of recommending 90 and 90, which means make 90 meetings in your first 90 days of sobriety. And if you go over 90, it'll be okay. Don't isolate. Communicate with someone in your recovery network every day. I cannot overstress the importance of avoiding too much time alone. Take action if you experience cravings or if you feel stressed, irritable, or depressed. Act now. Don't wait for the balance to tip in favor of an impulsive slip. Things you can do include go to a meeting, talk to a sponsor or friend, do something constructive such as read recovery literature. It's okay if you divert your attention from your problems by helping someone out with the difficulty they are experiencing. Focus on living and recovering, one day at a time. Minimize stress by focusing on your immediate, day-by-day needs and priorities. Looking back, I see this as one of my top 3 tools in early recovery. The other 2 were a daily renewal of steps 1, 2, and 3, and the daily use of a support network. Whenever you can, but at least once a day, find a moment to relax and be content. Create moments when you trust that this is going to work out okay. This can be a moment of prayer or meditation if you like, as either of these are effective in quieting the noise and chaos in your head and replacing it with a calm focus on recovery. Focus on the solution and let go of the garbage. Often, we waste time obsessing about problems and people that we have no control over anyway. Use the serenity prayer to create in your mind the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. When you experience anger or frustration, remember to pause. Calm yourself long enough to mentally hit the reset button and engage your thought processes. Learn your triggers. Avoid the people, places, and things associated with use. Learn about and start using effective coping skills. HALT, capital HALT. Avoid hungry, angry, lonely, and tired is a good one to know so that you avoid the stress and impulsive decisions caused by these. Play the tape through is another coping tool to get you to think about the consequences of the action you are about to take. Living Sober, cited footnote 1, is an incredibly useful booklet written by AA member Barry Leach and subsequently published as a first edition in 1975 by AA World Services. This booklet is an excellent collection of practical strategies and tools that have been passed down by experienced members over the years. The book is neutral on topics of religion and focuses squarely on abstinence and living sober a day at a time. Many of the tools and strategies I learned in AA and NA fellowships appear in one form or another in this collection. The 90-Day Plan, My Daily Commitments. Create, on paper, a daily routine that you'll commit to for the first 90 days. Keep this written copy around to use as a checkoff list each day. A figure follows. Title: An example of a daily routine. I will not drink or use no matter what today. I will take a moment, meditation or prayer, and clear away fear and worry and other mental background noise. I will calmly focus on my sobriety comes first today. I will stay in the solution. No matter how stressful today is, I'll make the right choices. If I experience cravings or impulses, or if I have a plan to drink or use, I will call someone in my recovery network and talk about it. I will also read my first step inventory to reassure me that a slip is not worth it. I will avoid the people, places, and things associated with using. I will call my sponsor or at least one person in my recovery network today. I will make a meeting today. Notice that everything listed above is an action. When you physically work a daily to-do list instead of passively waiting on and thinking about recovery, you are building real recovery. And remember, if you want to be sober in the long run, be sober today. There's no other way. A figure follows. Phase 1. Complete steps 1, 2, and 3. Complete a thorough and honest step 1, including a written step 1 inventory as explained below, and quickly follow that with steps 2 and 3. Keep your step 1 inventory on your person for 90 days. Use it every morning to reconfirm your first step conclusions. This will serve as a shield against denial and rationalizations. If any thought should come to mind suggesting you can control your drinking or use or just one last time, you'll see it is a lie. Wait it out, and these cravings will pass. If you are in AA, start reading the big book, especially pages 1 through 164. For NA, the basic text. If you like, read both. In addition to basic texts, there are many step working guides available in meetings and online. Some are sanctioned by AA or NA, some are not. You may want to ask a sponsor or anyone assisting you with step work which readings and guides they recommend. Step 1. I admitted that I am an addict and that my life had become unmanageable. Honesty is important for every step of recovery, but it is especially crucial to our step 1. As we do an accounting of the costs and consequences of our use, honesty is the scalpel that will cut through denial and rationalizations. Be warned, however, that when we cut through these, we come face to face with an ugly truth. I am an addict. I have been careful up to this point to avoid the word must. But our step 1 must be thorough enough in gathering and assessing the evidence so that we can convincingly accept or reject the following conclusions. I am an addict, and my efforts to control my addiction up to this point have failed and will, in all likelihood, continue to fail. Once you firmly accept these conclusions, you'll likely realize that you're screwed. It's okay. You're at the right place. Early recovery sucks. At least it did for me. I found it to be more than a little overwhelming when I fully accepted the reality of addiction. Suddenly, much of my life story became clear, and I finally perceived and understood the history of my progression and the true impact addiction had on my life. I also realized more fully the damage I had inflicted on others. Over time, I had distorted my perceptions into willful ignorance. I had chemically numbed myself to the facts and to all the effects of progression. But now the anesthetic was wearing off. Looking back, I needed to experience this painful truth. I needed the humbling experience of hitting bottom. Hitting bottom produced both the motivation to change and the willingness to accept help. Complete your step 1 with a first step inventory. If you are truly an addict, then your recent history should confirm the fact that drugs and alcohol are in control of you, and not the other way around. When I wrote my inventory, at first it was just a freestyle listing of the worst things I had done in my addiction as they came to mind. Then I moved on to a more structured accounting. I started with the past week, then the past few months, then lumped the past few years together, then a few items from the more distant past. You may want to organize patterns and consequences into categories. Emotional harm, subdivided into myself and 2 others. Physical harm, social harm, for example, intimate relationships, or again, subdivided into family, friends. Financial costs, moral failures, even an other category. As a separate part of your inventory, you may want to evaluate your level of addiction progression. See here Chapter 3 and evaluate which benchmarks and stages relate to you. What you are measuring in this inventory is the strength of your addictive drive. What morals or personal values did you betray in the process? How much of your life did you throw away? No matter how you go about doing a first step inventory, make sure it is thorough and specific enough to fully answer the following questions. Does the evidence confirm I cannot control my use of alcohol and or drugs once I get started? Can I handle my alcohol or drug? Or have there been unwanted consequences, not of my choosing? Does my history show a chronic and progressive pattern of addiction? Do I have a history of failed attempts at control? Is there clear evidence of addictive psychological reprogramming resulting in the creation of an addictive drive? Can I measure the strength of my addictive drive by adding up the increasingly harmful negative consequences? Do I fear my addiction? Condense your first step inventory to one page. Pick out the gut-wrenching facts that you can use as a part of a relapse prevention strategy. You may want this information to be kept private, in which case you can use keywords and phrases that spark memories of those events and consequences for you. But they will not make sense to others. Look at this list if you feel tempted to use. Play the tape through and visualize how this binge will likely end. Look even further and realize that the consequences tend to get worse over time. That's the nature of progression. The list is meant to create motivation to stick to the plan. It was a valuable tool for me. Earlier, I suggested you use this list to daily reconfirm your first step by keeping these painful facts fresh. Keeping the facts fresh will have the desirable effects of defeating denial and rationalization, powerful defense mechanisms that have kept your addiction alive and well. But keep in mind that conscious awareness of the facts about your history of addiction, though useful, is at the same time a psychologically heavy load. You lighten it when you share it. The miracle of 12-step recovery is that of the change from me to we. When your mood drops or you feel overwhelmed or you want to give up, talk to someone. When you are done writing this history, turn your one-page first step inventory over and on the other side write down some outcomes you would like to accomplish in recovery. Whenever you look at the bad side of addiction, look at the benefits of recovery as well. Remind yourself often that these outcomes are possible if you remain sober. There are rewards headed your way that you can't even imagine or list now. Just stay the course and find out what they are. Step 1 is not a measure of self-worth. The humiliating events, behaviors, and shortcomings listed in your inventory are part of a cause and effect process, the creation of an addictive drive and its effects. You wouldn't have freely chosen to take this course in life, to do these things, or to create this mess. You are an addict. While you are in active addiction, even the things you do or say while sober are directly influenced by a psychologically reprogrammed mind. As they say in the rooms, give yourself a break. Shame and self-loathing are not very useful to recovery. And sometimes you should tell that nagging self-critic in your head to shut the hell up, unless, of course, it has a suggestion or comment that is actually useful. That's usually not the case. Choose surrender, but never give in. Why surrender? A better question is, why go into the ring alone yet again, only to be humiliated in defeat yet again by that powerful gorilla known as the addictive drive? If you're an addict like me, the odds are always against you when you fight alone. With every defeat, the addiction grew stronger. I grew weaker, and the costs rose higher. Have you lost a job or your freedom or a relationship yet? Have you seriously damaged your health, both mental and physical, yet? If you haven't, you will. If you have, it can still get worse. While you live in active addiction, there's always another not yet that can be achieved. Surrender simply means asking for help this time around. I recommend a first step inventory because it convinces us to ask for help, while at the same time it builds motivation for us to accept suggestions. Once I accepted help, I soon realized that by doing so, I didn't give up anything of value about myself. I just gave up my loneliness and despair. And in return, I gained the allegiance of a fellowship. And that made all the difference. Don't choose self-reliance. Self-reliance is the Achilles heel of early recovery. Whereas a little humility allows one person to admit to another, I am an addict, pride produces denial, silence, and a closed-mindedness towards suggestions. Pride will keep you in the addictive cycle. As we humble the ego, we become teachable. This is a very common saying in the rooms, and a common theme in the literature of AA and NA. Step 2. Came to believe that through honesty and effort combined with the help of others, I could recover from addiction. Our first step is an admission that we are in over our heads. We surrender our solitary efforts and try a new strategy, a we strategy. If that sounds like a plan that may work for you, then you are ready to tap into the power of steps 2 and 3. Step 2 is a way to formally express that we are going to reach out to others and accept help and suggestions. It is an expression of hope. Wilson described another element that seems essential to success at this stage of recovery, and that is that we embrace this we solution with the desperation of a drowning man. Step 3. Made a decision to actively work a 12-step recovery plan to the best of my ability. There's only one true test of a decision, and that is the observable actions that follow it. Notes on picking a sponsor and creating a support network of recovering addicts. I used a sponsor, and my experience was great. He was both patient and wise in helping me put together an effective, simple plan. He was objective and very honest and straightforward with his insights and advice. Don't pick a sponsor impulsively. Certainly, family or longtime friends should not be sponsors. Also, I would advise against picking someone who seems to be recruiting a large number of sponsees. Pick someone whose experience and opinions you admire. It's a good idea to attend lots of meetings and listen for someone who strikes a chord in you when you hear them speak. Pick a sponsor whose sobriety is measured in years, not weeks. Sponsorship is serious work and commitment, and good sponsors neither preach aggressively nor advise too vaguely or abstractly. Good sponsors relate their firsthand experiences to you in a meaningful way, a way that helps you find direction. Good sponsors nudge you to keep working an active program. Sponsors shouldn't keep important insights about you to themselves. Beware of sponsors who just say what they think. They also need to think about what they say. Good sponsors teach, especially by example. Good sponsors give a damn. Take suggestions often in early recovery. We may be powerless over the first drink or drug once it is in our bodies, but we are certainly not powerless to take action in our own recovery. This was a message I heard many times in a meeting called the Just for Today group. But with that message comes the warning that taking action does not mean taking charge. It means putting wise suggestions into action. Progress in early recovery is often a direct result of taking suggestions. Generally, it is recommended that we do not make any major decisions on our own or begin any intimate relationships during our first year of sobriety. Our minds are clouded, toxic for at least a few months. Plus, we are probably vulnerable to reacting emotionally rather than rationally to situations and people. Speaking of new relationships, at this point in our lives, it's not likely that we bring very much in the way of positives to the table. As for the other person, they may be more likely to find themselves as a hostage to the relationship rather than finding a perfect soulmate. But this is not always the case. Be cautious, take your time, get advice, and avoid impulsive decisions in this and all other concerns for a while. Recover a day at a time. It is important to work recovery in the moment because addiction works that way too. Relapses are often impulsive and seemingly happen before we are even aware of what's going on. As a defense, we should prepare ahead of time with strategies to handle the temptations and situations that are surely headed our way. You will hear this next piece of advice often. Remember that your sobriety comes first, always. Keeping your sobriety today comes before a job, lovers, family, kids, everything. If you lose your sobriety, those things are in serious jeopardy anyway. For many addicts, early recovery proves to be one of the most stressful times they've ever gone through. It takes time to deal with the wreckage of an addicted past, so for the first few months, meeting your basic needs and staying sober should be ideally your only priorities. I realize this scenario is not always possible. Anyway, keep it simple as much as you can. This is a piece of advice that people in early recovery ignore at great peril. In case of relapse, the danger in a slip is that it makes it easier to repeat it a second time, then a third, and so on. A couple of things to keep in mind. Call someone before you drink or use, not after. When you sober up, tell someone, like a sponsor, what happened. With their help, analyze the thoughts and events that led up to the slip so you understand what went wrong. Get back to your recovery routine right away. There are two types of relapses. In the first, you start listening to the addictive voice, come up with a plan to use, and then at some point decide to go through with it. In the second, the relapse is so impulsive it happens without any plan. In either case, get back to a new 90 days quickly. If you have not been working with a sponsor up to this point, please try working with one this time. Day by day, keep up the willingness to make the right choices. If your relapses take you further than a slip and you find yourself back out there in full-blown active addiction, just bear in mind that you're likely to soon experience consequences severe enough to create the willingness you presently seem to lack. Or you can choose to skip that new crisis and reach out for help now. I'm sure the helping hands of AA or NA will be there. Chapter 5, the first 90 days sober, and steps 1, 2, 3. Cited literature. 1. Alcoholics Anonymous World Services. Living Sober. Year, 1975. Amended, 1998. This concludes Chapter 5.